Today we're going to be working on the chainsaw that I've got. This is actually an older Stihl 041 AV. This saw is from probably the late 60s, early 70s. And the problem that I've been having with the chainsaw is that when it's cold, it fires up just fine. It runs all right. But what happens is when the chainsaw gets warmed up, it wants to stall out. It also, if it does stall out once it's warmed up, it is an absolute pain to get started again. And if you put the choke on, it doesn't help anything. What basically has been happening to it is it floods out. And I did a little bit of reading about this to try to figure out what the issue is. And I had an idea, but I wanted to check with some other people who had had the same issue. And what happens is inside the carburetor, there's a diaphragm in there that moves the needle and seat up and down to allow fuel to go in to the carburetor. Now, what happens with that is when that needle and seat gets either worn out or dirty, or maybe like the ethanol fuel that's in there has messed with it, then what happens is the needle doesn't seat right, and it allows fuel to drip down from the carburetor when it's not running, and that will flood it out and create a lot of different issues with the saw. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take the carburetor off, and I bought a rebuild kit on the internet, and this has a new needle and seat in here. It's got a new bunch of gaskets with it, some diaphragms, a filter in there. So we're going to go through and we're going to show you how we're going to do this. So the first step here is to take off your air filter. This is the air filter. It actually needs cleaned, but I'm going to clean everything up once I get this apart. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull the top plate off of the carburetor. And it's just these two small nuts on top of there. There's also a screw right here with a bracket that holds that to the body of it. And so I'm going to have to actually get down in here and pull this screw loose so the top plate can come off. So now that that's off of there, we should be able to move this plate straight up. Now, I don't know if it might be stuck down in there a little bit. There we go. All right, so that's loose there. I can pull this up. Now, when you pull this up off of here, what you're going to have is you've got your choke rod is connected right here. And we need to get this out of the carburetor. So I've got that choke rod loose. You can kind of see that there. It just goes into this loop on the carburetor. So with that apart, I'm going to set that aside. There's a couple of fuel lines on this carburetor. Well, there's only one fuel line. This is the black line here is a fuel line. The gray line here goes down, and that is actually a vent line. And then we also have the throttle that goes to the trigger on here. And those three things are going to have to be removed before we can pull this carburetor off of here. Now this thing is absolutely filthy. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the air gun. I'm going to basically cover this area right here, and I'm going to blow all the dust and dirt out of there and try to get that as clean as I can before I take this apart, because I don't want any of that dirt going down into the actual saw itself. You don't want that inside your engine. So that was the throttle that I unhooked there. And now I'm just pulling the fuel line and the vent line off. And now I've got the carburetor off of there. So let's see what we have in our carburetor kit here. So we've got a diaphragm there. We've got a second one here. This is a very small filter. It's actually a mesh. And then we have some other gaskets here. And then we've got a little plug, a couple little plugs here. And then we've got this little arm that attaches to the needle. So those are the pieces that came in our carburetor kit. And I'm looking right now to see the old gasket here. And it looks like that is the upper and lower gaskets. So these two right here are going to replace this gasket here that was damaged. And that one right there. So I'm going to set these aside because we aren't going to need to use those until we're ready to put that carburetor back on. So at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm going to move some of these things out of the way. I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and I'm going to start pulling the plates off the carburetor. And I'm going to try to keep all these screws and pieces in order and keep them with the end that they came out of to make sure that they go back in the right places. So I'm going to set those aside. And then we'll take this plate off of here. And the underside of this, we're going to scrub this real well to make sure that there's no dirt or crud on it, because I can already see that there's a bunch of junk there. But this is one of the diaphragms on here. And this, I don't know when the last time this was replaced, but it looks like it's still in good shape. But we've got another one of these. And so I want to pay attention to how that comes off of there and make sure that when I put my new one on, that we're putting it in the same orientation. And I can already notice this piece is nice and soft. The one that I have here is very brittle. So if we look here, there are a lot of small holes in there that the air goes and passes through, and I want to make sure all that's clean. The other thing I'm noticing here is right there, I don't know if it'll focus on it, right in there, there's a small screen, and I'm assuming that that is probably this piece right here, because this is the fuel inlet. Right here on this side, the fuel comes into here, and I'm guessing that that's probably the fuel filter. I'm going to grab a small pick and see if I can pull that screen out of there. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and take this plate off of here as well. I don't know, that's not focusing very well, is it? So I'm going to set these screws aside over here in a different location. Okay, so this plate is fairly clean, but we're still going to go through and clean it anyway. And so there's a diaphragm on this side. The diaphragm on this side, underneath it, has a metal ring that looks like that. So I'm going to carefully try to pry this up. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. I don't know if I can even get under that. It's starting to come up. So if you look underneath it, there's that metal plate. And underneath there, the center of that was supposed to be attached to, the center of that button is supposed to be attached to here to lift up and down and push up and down on that piece, which will bring the float, the needle, in and out. I don't know if you guys can see that moving right in there or not, but it doesn't look like that needle's moving real smoothly. So we're going to go through and we're going to replace this piece and put a new one on there. And I'm looking at it here, trying to see if this doesn't look quite the same as this one. That one actually has a tab on it, and I'm wondering if the tab for that is gone. So it does have a secondary gasket underneath it, and this gasket is ripping coming apart from there, but I've got one over there to replace it with. So we're going to take this gasket off. Now, one of the things you can do once you get the gasket off of here, I'm going to put all the old parts over there. There's still a little bit of gasket residue on here. We're probably going to take like a razor knife and try to scrape that a little bit and get that smooth. So when we go to put that new gasket on here, it will seat properly and flat against there. But the other thing we're going to do here is we're going to come in and we're going to take this small screw. I'm going to need a different screwdriver for that. But we're going to take this screw out, and it holds that pin right there that goes across, and then we can lift out the needle, and basically this is just a lever arm here. But we got to be very careful, and I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there is a spring right underneath there that allows that to be spring loaded to pop up and down. We need to be careful not to lose that spring, and that we know where that spring goes to get it back in when we go to put our pieces back together there. And it looks like this plug right here is similar to the one right over there in the video. It's not focusing very well over here, but we're going to pull that out of there and try to get everything cleaned out on this carburetor so we can get it properly rebuilt. So I'm going to grab a few other tools, and then we'll continue. Okay, so I've got a smaller screwdriver here, and I'm going to take this screw out. And then we're going to pull that needle and seat out of there. So there's the old one. And there's that spring we were talking about. So we're going to get all that stuff out of there. And we're going to clean out all those holes and make sure there's no dirt or crud in them. And also I brought a pick over here. So on the back side here, I'm going to go down in this hole and see if I can, ooh, look at that. I think you can see that in the video. That looks like it's just like some type of like fibrous material or crud or something like that that's down in that hole. Now this is actually the fuel filter, and it is very, very dirty. So we're going to throw that out. We've got a new one over here, right there. We've got a new one that we're going to put into that spot. But I wanted to get that hole completely cleaned out. We're going to blow some compressed air through there. We're going to use some solvent, and I'm already seeing little specks of dirt that are coming out of all the holes here. We're going to make sure we blow some carburetor cleaner through here, some solvent, and while I'm at it, I'm going to take these two screws out. Now, if you have not adjusted your carburetor and the saw was running decent, it might be a better idea not to adjust these, but I'm going to take mine out so I can clean everything. I know I've already adjusted these two screws, so we can set them back to the factory specs when we're done. I'll talk about that when we go to put the carburetor back on it. But at this point, pretty much all of this stuff we can blow through, clean out. I am going to take this cover out here. I'm going to see if I can get the pick underneath the corner of it to pop that piece out of there. I may have to do that off camera because it might take a little doing to get underneath the edge of that. And I don't want to damage the carburetor body, so we'll see if I can get that out or not. We'll go from there. Okay, so what I did here, and I kind of did it off camera, but I used my pick to get underneath the edge of that little piece right there and pop that off of there. And underneath that, you can see there are some tiny little openings in there. We want to make sure all that stuff is cleaned out on it. While I was off camera, I did take out the mixture adjustment screws, the 2 screws that are on the side here. One is labeled H for high, one is labeled L for low. We're going to clean those holes out, and then I'll be back with the cleaned up carburetor for part number 2. Stay tuned.